we spend less time on it. We're going to get red lines, I hope. And so all we have to do is look how they vary from the main agreement. And that'll make it a lot easier. So it'll be quick. It should not take long to do. There's a requirement to state what is the business reason or rationale, need or rationale for the contract. I could not get the OIG to take this one out. I said to them, come on, it's to provide services for lithotripsy or laser. They said, just put that in. So we'll just have to state that, unless there's some other reason that I don't know about. For SWAL only, you have to show why there was the compensation is fair market value. And there is a requirement to implement effective responses if we find a suspected violation. So if we find that there was a contract that is a violation, we've got to find a way to find that out. So some of that is going to be the process and for entering things into the system, and we're going to go with it. Oops, no, I'm too close. Unfortunately, I went too fast. We have another hour, so we're going to go on a little more. We'll do some more. Although actually, I have to talk more about this. So we have another hour to talk about the CIA and the policies and procedures. So first, let's get questions. Anybody have any questions?
Are all companies going to be held to these standards?
It's going to be UUC.
No, competitors.
Oh, competitors? No. They're not under investigation. Now, I will tell you, we represent companies, lots of other lithotripsy companies. They don't have to have this tracking system, but we tell them to do virtually all the same things. No, they don't have, the fair market valuation is a little bit different. We tell them, you got to be sure that you have this fair market value. Now, do they have to go out and show why it is? No, but if somebody came to them, they'd have to know, so they really have to be able to support it. But you're in a different position. It's like being on probation, unfortunately. You have to do things that others didn't have to do because they got you. And it's just where we are. Yeah?
I want to make sure I understand one of your comments, and it's never done throughout the industry. And that is, are you telling me that if new literature comes out, okay, and we bring it into a hospital to try, we have to have a contract for that one trial?
Yes. If they're going to pay you, you can do it for free.
If you're free, you don't need a contract.
You do it free, it's okay. If you're going to charge them, you're going to have to do it.
And this does not go for the prostate company, as I understand.
Right, not for the prostate.
So you can bring in fiber or whatever you want, charge them, and they don't have to have a contract for that while they're trying.
Right. Yeah, because you have no physician investment. Yeah, but you're going to have, the problem is the Stark law. Let's talk a little bit about Stark, which I was going to do more later. We'll talk about it now. The Stark law requires you to have a written agreement. We have doctor investment here. And the doctor investment means that it's not Dr. Jones or it's not Dr. Norris providing services to the hospital, right? You're not doing it directly. You got a company in between, right? So it's what's called an indirect compensation arrangement. Actually, let me step back. Stark, what happened was the anti-kickback statute is a criminal statute. It's a violation's a felony. As you know, we've discussed, you can go to prison. You can get hefty fines. There's also a civil, so they have to convict you of it beyond a reasonable doubt. It's hard to do. And the government has to prosecute it, and it's expensive. The government likes to take cases, the government likes to win. They don't like to lose. They take cases that they can win. So, and they got a lot of other things going on. They can go after you civilly on anti-kickback under what's called the civil monetary penalty law, where if you do a violation of the anti-kickback statute, in a civil trial, they would only have to prove that it was more reasonable than not, well, greater than 50% that you did. Okay, much easier standard, but they still got to prove it. They got to get a jury. They got to prove it. It's hard. It takes time. You need a prosecutor who might be prosecuting people who are stealing things or people who are filing claims for things that never happened. So it's hard to do. So they came up with the Stark law, named for Pete Stark. That's not its real name. The real name is the Ethics and Patient Referral Act. And the purpose of that was to put in a civil statute that is what's called a strict liability statute. It's kind of like what happens to restaurants. You know, if you own a restaurant, the law says that the refrigerator has to be at 40 degrees or less. And every once in a while, the inspectors come in and they take the temperature of the refrigerator. If the refrigerator is at 45 degrees, you violated the law. It doesn't matter that, you know, the idiot who works in the kitchen unplugged it. It doesn't matter if, you made a mistake. You know, you got a bad refrigerator, you didn't realize it. It's not 40 degrees. There goes the fine. It's what's called a strict liability statute. Stark is a strict liability statute. It doesn't matter under Stark whether you intended to violate the law. It only matters if you violated the law. Okay? So it made it much easier for the government to stop things, right? Because all they got to show is that you violated it. You know, no big deal. So, and they put in, and you know, there's a whole history of it, what it covers. It covers what are called designated health services, so there are 11 of them. And one of the designated health services is inpatient and outpatient hospital services. So virtually everything that's provided in a hospital is an inpatient or outpatient hospital service. The only thing that is not an inpatient and outpatient hospital service, believe it or not, is lithotripsy, because it's a result of a court case that the predecessor to the current Council for Urological Interests, which is an industry group, was the American Lithotripsy Society. We represented them and we filed a lawsuit, and the judge agreed miraculously that lithotripsy is not a designated health service. It wasn't intended to be a designated health service under Stark. It doesn't fit the definition, and there we are. I will tell you, when I interviewed at Winston, they told me about they were going to file that lawsuit, and I left the interview thinking, you know, something that was done in a hospital, billed in a hospital, provided in a hospital, and arranged for the hospital was not a inpatient hospital service. I left the interview thinking this deck doesn't have 52 cards, but lo and behold, we won. So who am I to misjudge, you know, to second guess the Honorable Judge Kennedy? May you have a nice, good, and long life. So anyway, so that's where we are. So Stark has, Stark has a general prohibition. You may not, no physician may refer a patient to an entity, important word, for a designated health service that's payable by Medicare or Medicaid if the physician has a financial relationship with the entity, which can either be an investment interest, they use investment and ownership, I guess people would say it's not ownership, it's investment, or a compensation arrangement, unless the arrangement meets an exception. So there's a blanket prohibition, and then they give you certain cases where you can, where it's okay. Through things that are long to explain, there were a lot of exceptions put out in the law, and then the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who delegates the CMS, was given, there are certain exceptions that are listed, and then the Secretary was allowed to create new exceptions or to create additional requirements in the exception. And for reasons which I cannot understand, before Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which runs Medicare and Medicaid, it was the same organization back in, I forget whose term it was. It used to be called forever it was called the Healthcare Financing Administration, HCFA. And then along came people and decided that HCFA was not thought of very well. People thought they didn't do a good job, they didn't like them. And so they decided the way they'd solve the problem was they changed the name. So old HCFA became Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, abbreviated CMS. I don't know why, they lost one M somewhere. And we have the same group. And a lot of those people were very good, but some of the inefficiencies continue. And when they looked at the regulations, and when they looked at writing the regulations, for some reason which I cannot understand, because the law was written that if you have a direct or indirect financial relationship, you could not do it unless you made an exception. And each exception says if the physician talks about a relationship with a physician. The physician does this, it does that. There's one if the physician leases equipment, if they lease space, if they, all kinds of them. They decided that And so since the Congress wrote the law as direct and indirect, you would think that all those exceptions applied to direct and indirect. Right. For some reason, the people at CMS said, wait a minute, these all say physician. But if you have somebody in between that's not the physician, we need a new exception called the indirect compensation arrangement exception. God only knows why they thought that, but they did. So they wrote this indirect compensation arrangement exception, which I think people didn't complain about because it was easy, it was better. And so what it says is you only need 4 things. You have to have a written agreement signed by the parties. Compensation has to be fair market value. I'm going to forget the 4. Written agreement comes to fair market value. Can't violate the anti-kickback statute or billing, and I don't remember the 4th, but we'll talk about it later. Huh?
It's got to be a 1 year at least.
No, that's not in there. Interestingly, that's in the lease exception.
Salary can't go up or down during the term?
No, I'm not sure. I don't remember. But anyway, so we'll look at it. In any event, Judge once told me, don't ever try to remember the regulations, always look for them. In any event, so it's a stark violation if you don't, a long way to say, if you don't have a written agreement signed by the parties, you have a stark violation. And since we have there's doctor ownership in SWAL, if you provide the service and collect the money, you're going to have a violation. It's not worth it.
Can the agreement be as simple as the agreed upon price?
You got to say what you're providing.
Well,
Because the agreement, that's it. The agreement has to specify the services that are going to be provided.
the services is that it's a trial and this is the price.
Yeah, we're gonna give you a contract to use. It'll be short. It'll be probably a 1-pager, and it says you're gonna provide it. Whatever you're gonna provide, how are you gonna do it? You just want to have all that other stuff that you normally have. You'll have enough to meet the requirement. Now, normally, Bruce said 1 year, and most agreements, most of the exceptions require a 1-year agreement, and we tell people to have a 1-year agreement anyway because it creates. You got too many issues where you can look at that they'll say it's a kickback. But if you're doing a trial, it makes sense. It's a trial, the hospital didn't want to sign it, we'll do this, and then, if there's a real agreement, we'll do it. But don't change the price. Yeah.
Back to the uncompensated trials. If that's a federal patient, wouldn't that be construed as a kickback then?
I mean, if you did it free?
Yeah.
Well, you can't charge the patient. You can do it for free at the hospital, but the hospital's not going to charge the patient.
Okay.
And don't advertise. One problem with providing free services to government patients is that's considered a kickback to the patient. It makes them come. So, let me tell you, it's amazing. So, you can't advertise that you do this, but obviously you can do a trial. You're not going to advertise it. You're going to tell the doctor, look, let's try it out. We've got 4 doctors who want to try it, see if you like the new lithotripsy, or maybe the new Storz is good, or maybe it's a piece of junk, and you want to try it out. So you can do that.
The company cannot charge the hospital, can the doctor charge
The
patient?
patient. It's going to be awfully hard to charge a patient. I would think it's hard to charge a professional fee when you didn't have a thing. I think the thing to do is, either you do the short-term contract. What's the big deal? The more we get into it, we got a problem. We got to file things with the OIG. Just do the short-term contract, and then we don't have a problem. Why create problems for ourselves? Got to explain it to the government. I mean, what does we like to explain to them? This is the same government, okay? Where the OIG also issues what are called advisory opinions. An advisory opinion, if you want to do something and you're not sure it's okay, you're worried they're going to get you on a kickback, you can send in to them. It takes a long time to do, and they'll come out and tell you whether or not it's a violation of the law. Let me tell you about some of them. There is a company a national company that does kidney dialysis, runs dialysis centers. They notice people, you guys know better than I do, people on dialysis tend to be malnourished. So apparently they say the people don't like to take things like Ensure. They don't like to take whatever. So what they wanted to do was every time somebody came in for dialysis, they wanted to give them a can of a nutritional supplement to take. I spoke to the person who filed it. I said, I was wondering who filed this. I couldn't believe it. They got an advisory opinion that said that it was okay when a dialysis patient comes to a dialysis center to give them a can under the following circumstances. You can only give them 1 can. They have to consume it on the premises, and they have to be somebody who you can document by lab results that they were malnourished. I swear to God. This is who we're dealing with. I filed an advisory opinion free clinics get free medication, under patient assistance programs. And when Medicare Part D came into existence, the pharmaceutical